Remember these? This is an iPod Touch 4th generation that was produced by Apple in 2010. It is a little under 10 years since it released, because it released on September 12th. Obviously revealed at Apple's media event on September 1st, 2010. This is the 4th generation iPod Touch. This is the 8GB model. There you go. This is the 8GB model. I picked this up on eBay for $20. These are actually going cheap because this is really an inexpensive it's an inexpensive iPod that you can currently get out on the market. Don't know what this app's all about, but this came out in 2010. I purchased it in 2020, and as far as I have to say, this iPod is still kind of useful, even though it's currently running iOS 6.1.6, which is several years out of date. I think it was last updated in 2014. And yes, I'm making this video early in the morning, like I did with the radio video. And this is the reason why I bought this device, was because it had a dock connector for an iPod. I didn't have an iPod when I was growing up, and now I have one. And it's kind of pointless for me to have one of these, only because, you know, I have an iPhone, and this is what I'm shooting on, is my iPhone. But it's nice to go back to some basic task devices like weather radios, traditional radios, and even MP3 players, which is what this is designed for. And as I mentioned, the iPod Touch is still recognized by Finder in macOS Catalina, as well as on Apple Music, which I have right here. And it even detects all the music that's on the device. That's awesome. And Apple hasn't dropped support for this device, obviously, for Apple Music, mainly because there's really no point if literally everyone has an old device that they like to use from time to time. Not sure why they would still keep it available, but it's still useful today with most tasks. Obviously I have the 8GB model, and it tells you how much memory is left in it so that you know how much you have left, which is awesome. And if you've watched This Does Not Compute's video on the original iPod being recognized by a modern Mac, I would totally recommend going to his channel and watching a video on the original iPod still being recognized on macOS Catalina through Apple Music. While I'm here, I'm going to show you the ports that are on this device and all the buttons and everything. So here on the left side, you have your volume up and down. On top, you have your lock button or wake button, sleep button, and it's also used as a power button. On the back here, you have your camera. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a flash, but it could be a microphone right there. On the front, you got your camera here, and I think either a mic, it's either a mic or flash. Your home button, and then on the bottom it has a teeny tiny speaker, but it doesn't sound like it's coming from it. It actually sounds like it's coming from underneath the iPod itself, where the 30-pin dock connector is, right here in the middle. And then right here you can see it's a very dirty and needs to get cleaned. headphone jack. Currently, this iPod Touch, from my experience using it so far, is only really usable with Apple Music, or in this case iTunes. It is also useful on Safari, the Mail app, the clock, notes to an extent, calendar, the camera, which I will show you in a minute, as well as Facebook to an extent, and other apps that are designed for iOS 6.1.6. Some features that will not work are some of the apps that are in the App Store. They will just not work because you need at least iOS 9 or iOS 10 and newer for it to run. But like I said, I'm not sure if some of these apps work. The weather app that is on this device does not work, and I will explain that in a minute. But you will see pretty much apps that I'm typically going to be using on this device, and it's mainly just going to be Safari and the music app. And eventually I'm going to be doing another video with this iPod in the near future. It's actually going to be in the works later on in the afternoon when I receive the device. So this might be a 2-for-1 video type deal or whatever. But yeah, just stay tuned. So here are the apps that I do have downloaded. I do have the Facebook app downloaded, even though it's an old version. It still works, however, it doesn't have like the emoji or reaction emojis that you can select instead of hitting the like button. So that's the only downside of this. It's not the full Facebook that we know on newer versions of iOS, on iOS 13 and eventually iOS 14. These are two games I haven't played yet, but I plan to. There's a website that you could go to that will show you all of the apps that work on specific versions of iOS and specific Apple devices. Got the HD Radio app by Ubiquity, and this will be used in an upcoming video as soon as I get the device that I need to plug into this iPod to pretty much make it work. And some word games. I do want to get a little bit more games in here because it's just something to have instead of wasting my phone battery. That could be useful. And then here are your stock apps. Not sure if FaceTime works or the weather app. I think the weather app doesn't work anymore, and I'm not sure about Apple Maps, but calendar still works with iCloud if you have an iCloud account. iTunes kind of works, but it's really sluggish, and same with the App Store. I haven't messed with iMessage, so I wouldn't know that unless I have someone message me on iMessage. The Mail app actually still works, so you could still receive emails. The music app works perfectly fine, as pretty much this was designed to be an MP3 player. The Reminders app kind of works, but not really with iCloud, because I don't think it was designed for that when iOS 6 was released. The App Store does work, however, the majority of the apps on the App Store are for newer versions of iOS. You actually need to go to the website that I will show you in the video in just a minute, where you can show off all the apps that will support iOS 6. I'm going to head into Safari, and as far as I'm concerned, Safari works, and I'm surprised. And this is the only way you can watch YouTube on this device, is by going to the YouTube website on Safari, because the new app requires iOS 9 or iOS 10 and above to work. But YouTube works perfect on Safari, which is about the only thing that's really good as far as the internet goes. And YouTube is not really sluggish, it's actually really smooth. And obviously it uses Apple's designed video player and not YouTube's. But, like I said, it still works. And here is video using the iPod Touch 4th generation. Obviously, it is not very good at all. As you can see, there's my iPhone that's charging, and yes, it is upside down, and it is the 6S Plus. And the reason why it's the 6S Plus and why is it on a wireless charging pad is because this is a special phone case that is on Amazon for about 20 bucks. This is actually a really good phone case. I just hate how you have to lay it upside down, specifically on this wireless charger, just to get the good charge. But it seems to work alright. I don't know why this isn't charging, but it literally shows that it detects it. It says there's 65% battery on this Apple Watch, and you can barely see it with this terrible camera on the iPod Touch, so that's something to keep in mind. I'll also have a photo of the front-facing camera and the rear camera as well. If you want to know what the speaker sounds like, I'm going to play a snippet of this song, the 10 Commandments of Bart, from the Simpsons album, the Yellow Album. So that tells you how the speaker sounds like. I'm going to turn it down a bit so that YouTube doesn't copyright strike me. Sounds not really good. As you may know, since listening to that snippet, you're going to need headphones for it to sound really good, and it sounds about the same as if you had a headphone jack plugged into your iPhone or any other Apple device. And this is the video that I do recommend watching. Will an original iPod work on a modern computer? He tested out on this newer iMac, and he also tries it with a Windows laptop running Windows 10 and having iTunes installed. So he tries it both ways. This is the video that you should watch, and I'm actually surprised at the outcome. And another thing you should know about having this iPod is the video is actually using Apple's own video coding thing.
Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? I recently pulled my original iPod out of storage, and it got me wondering, is it still possible to get this to work with that?
And that shows right there that you could still get somewhat full screen video on this iPod. I do recommend watching this video because this video is just surprisingly interesting that an original iPod still works on a modern computer, especially on Apple Music on modern Macs. I'm I'm also recording this on the iPod Touch, only because I'm letting my phone charge a bit. But I will be doing another video with this iPod, and it's on this, and it's another HD radio video. And this is the GigaWare HD radio receiver. It receives FM HD radio, and like I showed you earlier with the HD radio app, I have to have this plugged in to receive HD radio signals on this device. So I plan to do a video on that really soon. And for those of you wondering if iMessage or FaceTime still works, well, I'm not sure about FaceTime right now, but iMessage does work, as you can see. These are messages from people who have other iOS devices like an iPhone, an iPad, or an iPod Touch. Mainly these are from people who have iPhone, but iMessage still works on the iPod Touch 4th generation, and that's actually surprising. If anything does come up with FaceTime, if it still works, I will make another video on this in the future telling you that FaceTime does work despite it being on iOS 6.1.6. One thing that is useful about the iPod Touch is that it's still recognized by the Find My app. So if I go ahead and hit the play sound button, you can find your iPod really easily. And that's the other cool thing about this iPod. It's still recognized by a modern Mac and the modern Mac OS operating system. Yeah, so the iPod Touch really doesn't have a great camera on it. Even with the videos that I've shown and some of the photos that I've taken, it's just not sounding that great. But, it's not a bad device overall. You could still use it as an MP3 player, and that's just about it. But there's other uses for it, and I'm going to be showing you some devices that will work with this iPod in an upcoming video, so stick around for that. And yeah, I will talk to you guys in the next video.